All right, guys. Well, then I guess first off, I just want to say thanks for taking the time to meet today, and thanks for making this whole training available. Um, it's yeah, I'm really excited to have started it, and knowing I got just really just begun to chip away at it. And there's a lot more to unfold, so it's pretty exciting. I guess the first thing I want to know is like how did this course come about?
Well, it's came about through a meeting Stephen and I had that was prompted by a mutual friend who said, "You two just have to meet each other." And Stephen's in Tokyo and I'm in Colorado, so we contacted each other, and we had both just written books. Stephen, Diary of a Yogi, and me, Clear Quiet Mind. And so we just met up on Zoom and started talking about our books together and talking about the practices that we had both done. And as we continued to talk, there were just innumerable similarities in what we had done over the past 30 to 35 years. It was uncanny how we had both done Tai Chi, and we had both done Reiki, and we had both done Kriya Yoga, and we had both done Qigong, and on and on and on. And so we just set up regular meetings. First, we interviewed each other about our books, learned more about each other, and then we set up regular weekly meetings and just started sharing our personal spiritual practices with each other. And after a very short time, we said, oh, we've got to write a book about this. And then as we started writing the book together, we saw the depth of the book, and that is really an instruction manual. We said, oh, we need to develop a course based on this book. And so that's how it all came about.
Wow.
I think we're truly soul brothers. When you meet somebody special in life and you recognize a kindred spirit, and as Kevin said, so many of our experiences and what we were doing at exactly that time just seemed to be in total synchrony. And I'm one to certainly trust the signs on the path, and that's something I encourage everybody to do, is to really look for those signs and synchronicities that kind of guide you home. So when I met a person like Kevin, who had a deep synchronicity with all these practices, and all his soul intentions were so similar, and we were both really kind of trusting this path that was bringing us into both healing and helping people basically liberate from whatever suffering, tensions, frustrations, stresses that they were struggling with. We really connected with that part of our hearts that we both really strongly desired to do. And we were at almost exactly the same point. I was coming out of a certain business perspective, and so was Kevin. And we were both, we'd both been in various partnerships and business partnerships and so on that had kind of quite naturally ended. And we'd both written books that were quite naturally a beginning. And so our friend, Dr. Anderson, who was the one who introduced us and suggested that we both introduce each other as authors on her show Enlightened World, which we did. And of course, once we did that, the polarities were so obvious and clear, from all kinds of perspectives. Certain things that Kevin was fulfilling and understood, and deep awareness that he had in his practice complemented certain practices that I was deepening. And so we spoke, and we said, oh, you're doing that, well, I could do this. Oh, what about you're doing, you really, well, I could do this. And that really it's kind of like having a soul buddy to work through really deep practices with. I mean, something that I'd yearned for all my life, it's to sort of sit down with another monk-like person, because I definitely have a monastic soul at heart, and sit down with them and be able to talk through the subtleties of our practices. So when we also got into the neuroscience side of it and discovered that our, even the graphs of our brains look very, very similar, and that there were certain ways that we could assist each other's subtle meditation techniques through these kind of comparisons, it was really mind-blowing. It was really just, whoa, this is just such a fantastic journey. Where did you come from, Kevin? And and I think he felt the same about me, which I was extremely grateful for. And so that depth of soul brotherhood and gratitude and a really deep love for each other has been something that's continued right from the onset.
Wow. How long ago was that?
Yeah, so
You met?
that was a year and about 4 months ago.
Oh, right.
And also taking into account, Matt, we're only a few months apart as far as our birthdays as well. So there was
we're both the exact same age, except Stephen has me by about 4 months.
4 months. And we'd spend almost the same time. This is something, when you relate research, they often talk about the length of time that meditators have been practicing. So we had roughly, within a few years, the same amount of time in meditation practice over decades. And that was kind of a real aha moment. It was like, oh, really? You've done all these practices and to this extent. And that was a really great kind of support for what we then saw in our brains. So we could look at our brains and say, oh, gamma, so those really high frequency brain waves, shows this kind of signature for both of us. And alpha theta, so the type of brain waves that happen in really deep stillness and synchrony and brain coherence. Oh, you show that signature too. And so we could actually feel like this kind of destiny was showing up in many different ways, even, you could say, objectively through scientific data. So that was quite curious.
Wow. So I'm kind of curious. So have the two of you ever even met in person?
No, we've met just like we're meeting right now on Zoom every week for the last 16 months.
16 months. Every week, Saturday and Sunday, we do the same thing that we're doing with you. We meet and we discuss and we share love and we share our, hopes for this planet and also our hopes beyond this planet. I think that's the thing, is in Kevin, I also found a soul who, like me, had connections beyond this planet. And that kind of consciousness and pure awareness and that kind of deep presence that traverses not just this physical dimension, but multiple dimensions and also multiple realms of consciousness is something that is really powerful. When we look at, say, we look back 500 years, what's commonplace today would have been considered a miracle back then. So we can only assume that what is considered a miracle or kind of beyond the average person's grasp in 500 years will actually be commonplace. So Kevin and I, when we looked at, what quantum science speaks about, that we actually do live in a realm and in an era of infinite possibilities when it comes to the quantum field, we both had similar love of science, similar love of the spiritual dimensions, similar love of going beyond, going into the unknown, to borrow Elsa's phrase from Frozen. We really had that deep feeling for what lies beyond the narrative self, beyond thought, beyond feeling. What is there, and can I find another person to explore it with? So that's, Kevin is that person.
Interesting. So the friendship feels it seems like it's transcending this time, even in a sense, right? I mean, it feels like I mean, I definitely have experienced this in some way, not intellectually. It's always been difficult to wrap my head around, but there is a sense of familiarity with someone. I know, like when my wife and I first met, there was a strange feeling that we knew each other before somehow. And I think that whatever there is to past life, future life, I think that it's not on a linear timeline. I think that that's the only thing I could assume, that it just doesn't make sense that it would be on a linear timeline. It has to be something very different.
We both feel that we have connected before in previous lives, but also in these states of consciousness that we're going into that are beyond the physical body, beyond the individual mind, we have this connection on a daily basis. We often will write each other about, well, most days we write each other by email about what our meditation practice was that morning. And most days there's a synchronicity between what came to us in our meditation, even though we're doing it at a different time, and Stephen's in Tokyo and I'm in Colorado. It's uncanny, the synchronicity between what arises, what insights arise in a particular day, what sensations and feelings, and the places that we go in our meditation. There's a connection across space and time there.
Wow. Well, I'm gonna step it back even a little bit here. This meditation course, was this developed like over? Did the two of you kind of talk about things, talk about how you meditate, and how would you, if you were to teach it to others? I mean, you both written books, so I'd imagine it's maybe assimilated from both of those books, or is it? I mean, how did like the development of the course come about?
Well, there was, as we talked about the similar practices, we also talked about similar things that we discovered in neuroscience and in studying the energy body. There was a framework that I had used in a meditation course that I put out about 12 years ago called Core Energy Meditation, which talks about 3 primary energy centers and this central channel connecting them. And as we talked more and more about the similarities in our practices, we found, oh, that's a good framework that we can use to expand upon. Okay, and we both we took that as kind of a bare bones and then really expanded upon it based on practices that we've done, and each of us added complementary refinements to it.
I think when you look at the practice itself, the practice of subtle energy meditation, and you look at the research, so if you take our own work aside, the research often talks about, for example, in studies of Tibetan monks and Carmelite nuns, the way that gamma brainwaves show up in love and compassion and in centering prayer contemplative practices. So we noted that also in our own practice, when I did Kriya Yoga and Kevin did Qigong, that we had very similar gamma brainwaves at that point. So when we were doing these initial meditations, which we call the light section, we were experiencing the same things, the same kind of relative experiences. And in the second part of the meditation, which we call the love section, where in those same contemplative and Buddhist practices, they are sharing love and compassion. So a similar signature also was evolving for us, that there is a continuation of gamma, and that there is often delta signature at that point of the graph. So we thought, well, this is something similar that we're both doing, and that's also supported in the research. And in the third part of the practice, which is the stillness section, we noted that in both our graphs, and when we've had them tested by independent parties, or Kevin's had us tested at a lab, we noticed that there was an alpha theta coherence, even a dominance of theta in the graph, which also related to the same research, which was talking about stillness, non-dual awareness, experience of going beyond the known, of being in the stillness and being able to sense or feel the pure quantum field of consciousness and awareness. And we both found these same signatures in our practices. So our practices were built up both from our backgrounds, in my case, Kriya Yoga through Paramahansa Yogananda, and Tibetan Clear Light Yoga through the Dalai Lama, and Kevin's own practices, which were similar. And he added, because he's also studied Kriya Yoga and Qigong and Reiki, and he had his own depth of experience in Taoist and Qigong practices. So we discovered, just through experimenting and reading research and sharing our own personal practices, that what was spoken about in the research was actually happening in these sections of the meditation. So that was a real consolidating approach and confirmation for what we both had experienced in subtle meditation prior to coming together and prior to reading the research. So as an example, when we first did some of these practices, we experienced a high frequency pattern in our brain waves. And we weren't trying to get this. This was just when we both sat down and did our very normal practices of raising energy and sharing love and compassion. So we discovered that what was talked about in the research, which was something we researched later, was already showing up in the patterns and sequences of our graphs quite naturally, and that we both showed this similar pattern of light, love, and peace naturally through practices we'd developed independently. So that was kind of a really useful insight and a big aha moment for both of us. We thought, well, it is really supported on so many different levels, and here we are together sharing this. So we really should share our findings, because we felt it would be of benefit, especially to people who were looking to make similar progress and help heal this planet like we are.
And when you say graphs, are you talking about the graphs that show up from the Muse?
Yeah, so that was another piece that we both, let's see, a couple months into these discussions we were having, Google started telling me that I'd be interested in this Muse brainwave sensing headband. And I clicked on it one day, as sometimes you do. And I said, Stephen, what do you think about getting this and comparing graphs and so on? He said, great. And we both got one, and we just started. So we didn't know a lot about the brainwaves at that point. We just knew deeply about our practice. So we just put it on, and we were doing our meditations, and we were sharing our graphs of our brainwaves with each other. And as Stephen said, we're like, oh, look at this gamma brainwave, and we're both showing this. And look in this section, here's these delta brainwaves and this alpha theta pattern. And then in the beginning, when we're focusing our concentration, look at how all these brainwaves kind of move together in a tight line. And both of us were showing the same things at the same points in our meditations. And so we just started naively posting our graphs to other people online, and they got pretty interested in it. And so out of that, we set up some group meditations via Zoom, and with people who also had Muse headbands. And so we started leading them in these meditations. Everybody had headbands on. We were sharing our graphs. people started getting excited about it, and then that was so that neuroscience and reading the brain waves branch was another thing that kind of fueled the development of this course.
All right. And is the course, how many sessions or seasons or how many times have you done it now?
So the session that you're doing now is the second time.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
A quick question on the graph stuff. So I've been following along on it, and one thing I keep noticing, at least I noticed the past few days, when I do open my eyes, I try to open my eyes very subtly, and if I open my eyes like with an intention to see it, I see a definite change. So I'm trying to sneak up on it, sort of, stay in the state of meditation and just barely open my eyes, almost like as if I'm looking at it through my peripheral. And what I see is the gamma is doing this crazy spike. And I can't figure out what that spiking is. Like, as I watch it, it's just spiking and then spiking again. And do you have any idea what that is?
Well, one thing we have discovered with the Muse headsets is that to really get accurate readings, it's important to be as still as possible and have your eyes closed and still and not moving. And
okay,
every little movement, every facial movement, opening, closing of your mouth, opening, closing of your eyes, everything can be picked up. Stephen,
correct. Correct. Well, gamma is very responsive to muscle movement. So if you are opening your eyes, therefore activating muscles in your face, gamma will respond like that. So that's actually an artifact. It's just a response to a muscle movement. The gamma that the research on the monks and nuns is talking about is an internal brainwave that happens from particular states. So it's not related to the artifacts. And of course, even when research has been done on quite advanced practitioners, there are different states in which there are movement. So those have to be discounted when they're comparing still practices. Part of the thing with gamma, that is, because it's a high frequency brainwave, it's very subtle. The kinds of measurements are difficult to take, and it responds in all sorts of different ways. So if you go outside and open your eyes, it will respond in a particular way. If you sit down and you close your eyes and you drop your head, it will respond in a particular way. So there are lots of movements that will shift gamma, which are in fact, body or muscular movements. But the inner movement, which in Kevin and my case, when we're very still when we do this and we're drawing energy in or sharing that love and compassion, it rises of its own accord, in its own way. It's in a response to an inner energy movement rather than necessarily an outer muscular or facial movement. So the gamma brainwave, there's been a lot of interest in it. When you read the work of different practitioners and researchers who talk about the awakened brain, for example, they advocate looking at all the brainwaves. It's not about one particular brainwave, it's about the relationship of each brainwave to another. So one thing Kevin and I discovered in researching these practices is that, and they speak about this when they discuss the differences between meditation, which is called focused attention meditation, and meditation which is open monitoring meditation, that in fact a lot of yogis, for example, in the Himalayan yogi tradition, use the gamma brainwave or focused attention, because that's often the correlation, is that when you focus strongly, deeply, you'll get a rise in the gamma brainwave. That they use that to then take them into those deeper states of awareness and stillness. So, and Yogananda spoke about that many, many times in his practice, about the importance of Kriya Yoga, which is a focused attention technique, in order to raise your vibration or raise your energy to a point where you're able to access these dimensions, states of being, states of consciousness and awareness. And, you know, it was interesting when you were talking about this, going back to what you said about past lives and connections and a continuum of consciousness. I truly believe, you know, that all of us here, sitting here, and all the people listening to this are listening because they do actually have a connection on the continuum of consciousness, rather than calling it a past life, but on that continuum where we all are one, where there is actually a one shared or collective consciousness, that we are actually able to connect across time and space. And that by doing these subtle energy meditation techniques, we actually start to tap into things beyond that. And these kinds of experiences that you talk about, a little bit like what I was saying about the 500-year cycle, is that these experiences will become commonplace. We'll recognize, like Kevin and I have, that we'll recognize those traits and states that do make up kindred souls and allow us to experience going beyond. So, you know, the continuum of consciousness is a bit like the continuum of brain waves. It's not about a particular past life any more than it is about one particular brainwave. We really encourage people in our course to look at the relationship between the brainwaves. So if you have gamma, can you use gamma in relationship to help love and compassion for this world? And if you do have love and compassion, you show that signature and you understand, can you use that to help you deepen your experience of stillness and awareness of being? Can you then extend that and experience that as a moment-to-moment experience throughout your waking day? Can you then take your waking moments of presence into your dream state? Can you wake up first thing in the morning and connect with that presence and then continue that cycle? Bring it into your meditation, bring it into your waking state. You know, so the relationship of those lives, the relationship of those brainwaves, the relationship of your meditation to your waking state and your dreams, all of that becomes of really crucial importance in understanding how strongly our narrative self actually gets in there, comments on everything, and what we need to do to be able to let go of the self and become truly present in our day-to-day lives and contribute to peace and an awakening on the planet.
Interesting. So in a way, it seems like rather than looking at meditation as a way to calm the brain, deal with some stress, have a little better clarity, like the way I think meditation is in generally looked at, this seems like it's really looking at it at a much more deeper level, where it is finding multiple pathways to, I guess, a lot of different levels of a more profound experience in life. You're talking about like finding, like, if you're experiencing more of the gamma wave, you can take that into more love, and if you experience more of this love, can you take that into and use these as threads to go deeper and deeper and have a more I guess just a more profound experience in life? Is this I don't think I'm summing it up very well, but I am finding that it seems like this form of meditation is about going much more deeper and more like roots of a tree. It's not just deep, but also spreading out. It's really expanding more of this life experience, rather than just what meditation often is, which is just keep the brain a little calm and get through your day.
Yeah. And we, that being said, there's a sequence to build up to this. So we begin right where people are, which is in the midst of stress and anxiety and frustration and so on. And we focus first on two primary inner skills. First, being able to turn inward and sense inside the body so we can start to get in touch with what's underneath that anxiety and that stress and that frustration that we're feeling. And then mindfulness, to be able to approach that as a curious observer rather than reacting to it or being afraid of it. And we take those two primary skills and then use them to go through a step-by-step process of meditation. So we begin by relaxing the body. So we begin by de-stressing, aligning the posture, relaxing the body, generating a positive inner state. So that is the foundation of it. And that's usually where what most people think of when they think of meditation. Like you said, we're just trying to relax a little bit, chill out, feel a little better. And that we are doing that first. And then, but we use that as a foundation to then develop deeper states of concentration, to develop specific different states of consciousness, and like a toolbox of inner states, and integrate these states together. And to the point where we begin by concentrating and relaxing and feeling good, but then we generate a very high frequency state of consciousness, a loving state of consciousness, a deeply peaceful state of consciousness, and into a non-dual state of consciousness where we feel a liberation from the confines of this self and this body, and liberation into this oneness of consciousness. But it's a step-by-step process that builds on foundations, like learning how to consciously relax.
Makes sense.
And that sequence is followed then by development of insight and helping ground, because quite often when people meditate, they still feel the difference between the meditation state and their waking everyday state. So it's very important to ground, develop insight, reflect on our practice, bring it back into the world. Keep asking the question: how can we be of service with peace, with love, with light? How can we be of service? So that continuum, that relationship, again, coming back to relationship of past lives, relationship of brain waves, relationship of meditative states. It's also how do we relate to the world? So often I get asked that question: oh, I can't connect with this world. It's just a struggle to live. I'm having trouble with money. My health isn't good. I don't have a relationship, or I can't find whom I'm looking for. So these subtle energy meditative states help us to develop a relationship with the world, help us to develop a relationship with our soul purpose. Because it's a really big question for people. What am I here for? I find myself in this physical body. You take us into these really deep states. I feel peace, but then I go out into the world and I bump into a work colleague who's really mad at me because last week I didn't do something that they were expecting, or vice versa. How do I deal with those simple situations in my regular everyday life? And that's also a big part of what we do, is help people with that part. Once you've finished the meditation process, how do you go out in the world and be of service? What simple practices? One of the practices that I do myself, and I always encourage people to do, is to have a one breath that you are doing and maintaining throughout your day. Breathing in a breath of love for a count of 4, pausing briefly, and breathing out a breath of love and compassion for people all around you. Just that simple thing, practicing it over and over again. And it's a bit like a drop of ink in the ocean. At first you don't notice any difference, but once you've been practicing that for days and weeks and months and years, something really powerful happens. It comes through in your speech. People feel it without you even having to say anything. You can walk into a room and somebody will come over and say, oh, I really want to talk to you. I feel so relaxed around you. I feel peace. So that beauty of presence and that grace and that ability to surrender to the consciousness, that profound consciousness that's underneath all the frustrations and stress and fears. You know, that is a true gift. It's a gift that you have, everybody has. They just don't realize it. It's like this extraordinary secret that's so simple that when you get out of the way and you allow that pure being to shine through, that all those things you've dreamed of happening in your life, you know, finding the right relationship, having a flow of abundance, feeling vitality, and being very present in all your moments, they just start to unfold again and again and again. And you start to notice them. You know, I know in our course, people say again and again that after a few weeks, they say, oh, you know, suddenly I've been noticing I don't have to try so hard, or all these things I've been thinking about, I'm not thinking about them anymore. You know, that state of peace starts to overtake the constant chatter of that narrative self that's always commenting on your experiences. Suddenly you're letting go of that, and you're just present. You're just awake. There's just this beautiful flow of grace that comes from connecting to something that is much larger than ourselves. So I think those moments are really precious. And sometimes, you know, the simplest, you know, miracles and gifts I've received have been people on the course have said, you know, I know now how to get into that state where I feel peace. Just because I haven't felt peace before. I felt frustration. I felt tension with all these world events or whatever it happens to be. So the simplest, you know, the simplest gift of peace is a gift I know both Kevin and I, and I'm sure you would too, through all your work, whatever work we do. If we give that to our world, then our world actually comes back into a situation of balance and understanding and kindness. I mean, kindness is such a potent tool for our entire planet to work on.
Yeah, it's interesting. So like the draw toward meditation, which may often be to solve a specific problem, leads people to uncover not to solve that problem, but to uncover the issues that were creating that problem more from a deeper, more internal point. It seems like Alan Watts says, the only thing you really need to change in yourself is that part in you that wants to be changed. And it seems so that this, through meditating, especially like this sort of meditating, I've done a lot of different types of meditating for the last 20 years, and this, I'm really appreciating what I'm getting out of this so far, this more subtle form of it. Yeah, it does seem that there is, and from what you're saying too, that by going deeper and actually going past the concern of the problem is what can solve the problem, along with a bunch of others that you may not even know you had.
Yeah, one of the things we're doing by going into the body, we're really using the body as a vehicle for meditation through this interoception, this sensing inner sensations, is that we're releasing these tensions on a cellular level. So these tensions that are related to a way of thinking, feeling, and believing about life start to get undone on a cellular level. So you just start responding differently to life. There was one person on our course who I talked to today. It's only been a couple weeks on the course, but he said, you know, I was in a parking lot today, and this person, and I was just getting ready to turn into this parking space, and this person just zipped in and went right in and took the space. And I had my turn signal on, and I was clearly getting ready to turn there, and that person just zipped in, and then they got out and didn't look at me and slammed their car door and just ran off to what they had to do. And he said, you know, even just a couple weeks ago, my initial reaction would have just been, outrage, and I would have just wanted to go give them a piece of my mind and just, let them know that what they did was wrong and that this was my spot. And he said, today, I just was filled with compassion for this person. I didn't have that reaction. I just felt, oh, I feel really sorry that she's all in a huff and racing away and not wanting to make any contact and obviously all stressed out in her day. And that just came through. I wasn't thinking about doing that. I just responded with that. And he said that was just a profound moment for me that I haven't experienced before. He said, for years and years and years, I've read these books and done this, talked in groups about how we want to not be reactive and we want to come from compassion. And we've talked a lot about it and how do we do that? And there, I found just a couple weeks into this course, it just happened.
Oh,
yeah.
Interesting. So I guess the hope then in this course, through this course, through meditating, I suppose in general, but specifically through this course, is to reach a point that feeling more connected with others, feeling more connected with, I guess, myself internally, right? Knowing more clearly, confidently, where I'm being drawn, where I'm going. For me, speaking, like as an artist, being fueled by creative pursuits sometimes means you go off in a million different directions. So hopefully for me, I might be able to have a more clear channel and direction. Are there potential drawbacks though that I should be aware of?
Well, certainly as we've written in the book that comes with the course, as you turn inward, you're accessing your feelings, you're going to feel those feelings, right? You're going to feel those anxieties. You're going to be in touch with those fears, and you're going to notice things about yourself that may not feel good, that you may not like about yourself. And so that's really why we teach right up front this skill of mindfulness, which is to be accepting and curious about your inner state, and without being identified with it or thinking, oh, that's me and I don't like that part of me. Just to have this accepting, curious, mindful attitude as you go inward. And to know that as we touch in with this stuff, sometimes it doesn't feel so good. But that's just part of the process of becoming aware and letting it go and relating to our inner self and the things that we think we don't like in a whole different way.
I think mindfulness and self-compassion are so critical to all of our practices and our ability to move with safety and peace and love in our planet. A big thing that we've noticed, and that I've noticed on healing courses that I've taken in the past, is that initially whatever blocks that you might be working with will seem to magnify, because you're bringing your awareness within through interoception, and you suddenly notice things that you haven't noticed before. Maybe the aches in your body that actually were there all the way along suddenly become much more apparent. And you might even have a healing crisis of one sort or another. A flu might come along that seems to be a bit stronger than it was before. Or you might suddenly feel like, oh, I'm getting reactions to particular food or drink that you didn't notice before. So your sensitivity, because it's heightened, is naturally going to be more aware of things that pass through your body. You start to look at the world with a different awareness. You become aware of things that perhaps actually really are impinging on you, or environments that really are not conducive to your peace that you never noticed before. So that's a natural part of developing a deeper awareness. And we encourage people just to, again, self-compassion, be peaceful, take things at a pace that you're comfortable with. It's a little bit like doing yoga practice, don't overstretch yourself. So it's the same in these kinds of practices. Don't push the energy through your body more than really you're able to handle at a particular time. And so it is the same with, emotional and mental aspects, is that you might find suddenly that your awareness of other people's judgment or your own judgment suddenly becomes uppermost. You become so aware of what you're saying or what other people are saying. So those are really important parts of awareness and self-compassion, and not being too hard on yourself. Quite often I've been a teacher on courses where people become very self-critical, even more than they were before. Oh, I had a negative thought. Yeah, well, of course you had a negative thought. It's actually okay. It's okay to have these kinds of feelings that come up, and not to be so harsh on yourself that you start, beating yourself up for really quite natural awareness, processes that are gonna happen. They're very natural to become more aware of your judgment, more aware of your body, more aware of your tensions. So I don't necessarily call that a drawback, but I do call that a magnified awareness. It's something that happens for most people, myself included, in those times of practice where you are adjusting your energy body to the subtleties of the meditation process. Yeah, so that does definitely happen.
Something that we brought up a little bit in last week as well, but I get curious sometimes of trying to decipher what is maybe some true intuition, some call from or tug from the universe of some sort, deciphering that from what might just be a egoic desire. For an example is, at times I'll feel, let's say there's a call toward doing some type of work, and suddenly there'll be a coincidence or some sort of synergistic experience where all of a sudden there'll be an advertisement for a training of some sort. I'm like, oh, I gotta invest in this training, and then as I do the training, I realize this wasn't it at all. This was actually a really bad choice, and now it was whatever it was, a couple $1,000s just invested, and so that sort of thing I've experienced several times. I know other people have. Do you find that through this you improve your sense of being able to decipher intuition from whatever else that whatever else seems like intuition, and maybe we trick ourselves into believing?
Yes, certainly. I think it begins with this heightened inner sensitivity to how different input feels. There's a certain feel to something that's intuitively right that is just kind of a matter of factness, versus like, oh, I have to have that. I got to do that now. I got those are, you used the word egoic or ego. But the egoic desires have more of this urgency, this, I got to do it right now. I'm going to lose out. I'm going to, like, that kind of feel to it. Whereas the soul aligned information tends to be just, oh yeah, that just feels right, and it's easeful, and it just flows, and it's kind of happening of its own accord. And that being able to differentiate those and tune in to the flow that is coming from the soul and not coming from that small self trying to grab onto an experience has a real different feeling to it.
Yeah, I agree. The power of intuition, also the power connected to something you were discussing before, the creative process, is a really good example. Quite often when you talked about the number of projects that you have. So if we use that as an example, and you've got maybe 30 different ideas, and you're wondering which is that intuitive aha moment, which is the one that I'm supposed to follow, which is, you can also relate to people saying, well, what's my sole purpose? And suddenly they see 30 different ads in the newspaper and they wonder which one to pick from. It actually comes back to several moments before that decision. Once you start to move into a state of presence, as Kevin was saying, you're actually in a state of real ease. So that simple technique I was talking about, breathing in love, breathing out love. So you're doing this through your day, and I'm very simply breathing love, or I'm breathing spacious awareness, or I'm breathing peace, or I'm breathing compassion. So you've got an anchor. You've got a particular way that you anchor presence in your daily life. So you have that. Suddenly these creative thoughts come. And for me, I'm a musician. I've also done a lot of filmmaking in the past. A lot of my best moments came in really simple places, like in the bath, when I was out in a forest walk. They were often places where there was actually just space and stillness. And I just wait for those. As Kevin said, there's no hurry. You've got 30 thoughts maybe, but you just put in a simple intention first. Oh, which one of these is the one I'm supposed to follow? So there's no hurry. And you notice, exactly as Kevin's saying, when the ego reaches out to grab it. So there's a part of yourself that definitely has that strong desire. Oh, I'm going to make the most money out of this one. I'm going to go with that. So I put that one aside because I know that part of myself that wants that. And then there's another one. Oh, look, there's that famous director. I actually really wanted to work with him. I'm going to give him a call. But then you put that aside, because if that's going to happen, it's probably going to happen quite naturally. So you stay in this state of presence and easefulness while you're working your way through those 30 choices. And suddenly, it's like taking care of children or newborn infants. They're precious. You treat each of those 30 ideas is really precious, and you let them have. Some of those children want to be off on their own. They want to go and wander away. But then there's one certain one that there's a certain light and presence around when you're in that state of presence. It doesn't pull you off presence. The ones that you feel, oh, I really want to do, I've got to do that. You know it's not that one, because that's pulled you out of that state of presence that you've so carefully nurtured and anchored. So you kind of match the state of presence in one to the state of presence in another. And when you feel that alignment, it really is an aha. You really get, oh, that's my intuition. And then as you keep working in that way, you start to recognize those moments of intuition. So mine, for example, I have a blue light. Blue light shows up quite dramatically for me when something is the right decision. And for everybody, it's different. That just happens to be for me personally. But you start to develop the practice that gives you presence to recognize intuition and to also recognize when there is something that is out of that state of presence.
All right. Well, Kevin, I see you got to go. We've been talking for an hour, and my computer's actually just about to die anyways. So
it was wonderful.
Yeah, I so appreciate this conversation. This has been just completely illuminating, just for me personally, and I think it's going to be really helpful to this documentary, and helping get a clearer picture for what this course is really about and what you guys are providing.